All right, warriors, here we're going to switch our focus from social cognition to social influence. Now, cognition is your thinking and how your thinking changes in the presence of others or in relationship with others. Social influence is how other people, influence us, how they change our behaviors. If you think it doesn't happen to you, it does, and I'll demonstrate this to you in class. So let's talk about influence. Social influence happens when our words or actions of other people directly or indirectly influence a person's behavior. So how does another person influence your behavior? If you find yourself making choices that you wouldn't because you're around other people, that's social influence. We do social influence because of norms. It's what we're used to, and give yourself a little bit of grace and also a little bit of credit because we grow up in a society where we follow norms. A norm is a socially based rule that tells what people should do or not do in various situations. When we're little, we learn all about these. These are those anchoring effects, things we learn when we're young that are usually unshakable, like sharing, prejudice sometimes, all these things that are difficult to change over time. But anyway, norms, they're not spoken. It's just what we do because we are supposed to. Norms, how do they work? Well, if a person doesn't follow them, we make fun of them. We laugh at them. They might get embarrassed. They might get nervous. So it's just easier to follow social norms. When we go to see a movie, there's a big crowd, and no matter how many people, the line is usually formed. We're going to form lines to get the popcorn because it's expected behavior. Examples of norms includes you walk on the right side of the sidewalk. Same thing happens in the hallway. You don't talk to yourself in public. You might do it when you're alone, but you won't do it when you're out on the streets. You don't say hello to everyone. You're maybe more reserved. And when you're asked how you're doing, sometimes we say, "Oh, I'm doing good." We don't really tell the truth because people aren't expecting us to tell the truth. Like, I'm really having a crummy day. If you want to break some social norms, here's some suggestions just for fun. Wear your clothes inside out or backwards. Get up in somebody's face when they're talking to you. Whisper when you talk. Sit really close to them. It'll feel weird, but it's kind of fun. I used to do this just for fun because, I'm a social psychologist, I guess. Now, as you might expect, there are different types of norms. These are called injunctive or descriptive norms. So injunctive norms are behaviors which are perceived as being expected by other people. When you show up somewhere, you look to others to guide your behavior because maybe it's the first time you've ever been there, but we're looking to avoid disapproval, to avoid punishment, and to avoid that embarrassment and nervousness. When you go to a library, you speak quietly. When you're in a restaurant, you receive a phone call. You don't be overtly a jerk about it. When we're in a movie theater, we silence our phones, hopefully. Although I gotta say, these injunctive norms are really changing since COVID. I personally wouldn't go to the grocery store wearing my pajama bottoms. I wouldn't come to school wearing those pajama pants, but you guys seem to be okay with it. So those things are changing over time. And injunctive norms, that's natural for norms to change. We also have descriptive norms, and these are the rules that people feel that they have to follow based on what people typically do. So this is what we normally do when we show up to this place. Like clapping in a theater, the movie's over, we clap in the theater. If you're at a show, you might stand up for a standing ovation. Again, dress codes. So this is what is typical when you show up to a job interview. I talked about that earlier in this unit. You show up to a job interview looking nice because you want the job. Typical behavior. Now you see a picture here of old cars. It looks like in a hotel parking lot, but let's pretend that this is a used car parking lot, right? And you show up and you can see the kind of litter all around the picture. Well, here's an experiment that Dr. Reno illustrated the effects of the norms. So participants are walking into the parking lot and they just got handed this advertisement leaflet, and there is a plant. So the plant, the Confederate, the person who is involved in the experiment. So they get these leaflets and they see the plant throw the leaflet on the ground. They see that that is acceptable behavior. The injunctive norm says if I get a leaflet, I can throw it on the ground. And so they're studying how many people are going to throw their leaflet on the ground because they saw somebody else do it. Well, half the time, people followed that. But then he reversed it, and the parking lot was clean. There's no litter on the ground. Now they see the plant. He gets the leaflet. Rather than throw it on the ground, he starts picking up the trash, right? And so the next people who get their leaflet, they decide they're not going to add to the litter because they just saw the guy who is involved picking it up. I'm not going to do that. So these are the ways that our behaviors can be influenced and decisions are made that follow the norms that are being set in the situation. Now, we do the same thing in classes. Your teachers and I, we establish norms from the very beginning of our class, like expected behavior. When you come in the door, we're going to do a bell ringer. We're going to get to this, that, the other. And, we have our routines, and it is the expected typical behavior because you're great students and you don't want to suffer the harsh embarrassment of getting called out. Hey, you didn't do your bell ringer. Come on, let's go. Now, is it that severe? I don't know. Now, ways that social influence can affect us based in groups is deindividuation. See that term at the top of the slide called deindividuation, and it's exactly what it sounds like, where we no longer associate with ourselves, the individual. So loss of individual identity happens in the presence of the group. Think of riots, looting, and all the things you've seen on TV and the media and stuff, and how those people might look like when they're committing the rioting acts. Causes of de-individuation come down to diffusion of responsibility and diminished awareness. Now, let me talk to you about that. Diffusion of responsibility happens when we de-individuate because we believe that we can't be held accountable for our actions. Case in point, putting on the white hood of the KKK. You can't identify that person when they have the hood on. They are masked. The individual is hidden. And so for that person, it's acceptable to commit heinous acts because they lose themselves and they lose their own individual values. They forget that doing heinous acts isn't acceptable if I am unmasked. But when I'm masked, I become this different member of a group, and it's okay. Now, my original thought was to show you some January 6th, 2021 rioting footage. And I remember that and watching it, and the men and women who were rioting at the Capitol were masked. But then I thought, a lot of that was still COVID restrictions in 2021. And as I began watching that footage, I did notice that many of those people were unmasked. And so maybe diffusion of responsibility was not a case for some of them. And that also could have affected, since they were wearing masks, maybe they lost themselves a little bit and they started doing, number 2, the diminished awareness. And that's shifting your attention away from internal thoughts and standards and toward the external environment. So when we de-individuate as a member of that group, we just lose our minds. We lose our head. And the fact that, again, like in a time of a riot, and people who are beaten on police officers, I have extreme respect for police officers, and ordinarily me by myself, I wouldn't beat up on a police officer. But you put a mask on me and you can't identify who I am, and then add into, this is the diminished awareness part of that, add into that I'm part of a crowd that is agitated, that's full of fight or flight energy, the testosterone and the amped up energy, and I just kind of get swept up in the moment. People make decisions that they wouldn't ordinarily make, and if they're part of a gang and the sad and tragic gang rape, then the energy can be explained by a diminished awareness of myself. Now, thankfully, this can work in reverse as well. It's not all ugly. We get motivation from other people. So people's motivational state is affected by the mere presence of others. This is called social facilitation, and social facilitation facilitates the improvement of my performance based on the presence of others. So there's this experiment of Norman Triplett. He has illustrated this through his bicycle experiment. He tried or studied cyclists who are cycling on their own, they're cycling on a track, and then they're cycling with a partner. And when do they have the fastest times? When they have other people with them. And it's not always about competition. It's just the shared suck of things. Like, I'm going to do better because you're with me and we're going to suck through it. And sometimes it is competition. But the cyclists tried harder. They rode faster when they were with other people. Maybe because they're racing against someone else. They have somebody else to measure their performance against. They're just not alone. And so this produces an increased speed. Performance is better in a group. We also have a better record on the teams if we're playing at home. I don't know if that's true for us today. We'll have to figure it out. So social facilitation, we got those people cheering for us. We're going to perform better. But as you might expect, this one also has a negative side. Social impairment happens because other people are around. Think of playing tug of war. Now, well, I don't know when the last time was you played tug of war. That seems like something that's a pre-COVID thing too. If we've got somebody else working with us, it might give us the permission to stop tugging quite as hard. We also social loaf. Think of the last time that you had a group project and you got paired with somebody who's a great student, and so that gave you permission to slack off. That's the social loafing side of things. Pulling a rope, clapping as loudly as possible, trying to solve intellectual puzzles. We ask other people for help. So social impairment is sometimes damaging to our performance. We slack off. We definitely slack off with social loafing. We expect other people to do the hard work. As usual, I've got lots of other things to share with you about breaking social norms and the uncomfortable feeling of being the one that breaks the social norm. And if you want to break some social norms, we'll try it out.